The Eagle by Rosemary Sutcliff, Chapter 18, The Waters of Lethe. There was a sudden pause. The white cow, startled by the unexpected voice, fidgeting and blowing with lowered horns, the man, who had checked with a grunt, peering down through the rowan branches. Then the soft growling of the old dog, which Marcus had not at first noticed, rose suddenly to a sing-song snarl, and was checked by a backward thrust of the hunter's heel. "Well met, Demetrius of Alexandria." There was no time to waste in surprise and explanation. Marcus said quickly, "Gwern, we need your help." "Aye, I know that well enough. You have brought away the eagle, and the Epidai are up after you," Gwern said. "The word went by at sunset. And the Demnani and my tribe at least will join spears with them." He came a step nearer. "What would you have me do?" "We want food and a false trail if you can provide one." "Food is easily managed, but it is more than a false trail you will need to get you in one piece to the wall. Every pass to the south will be guarded by now, and there is but one way known to me that is likely to be left open." "Tell us how to find it." "Telling is not enough. It is a way that is a death without a guide. That is why the tribesmen will not trouble to guard it." Or so he thinks, right? "And you know this way?" Eska spoke for the first time. "Yes, I know the way. I will take you by it." "How if you are caught with us?" Marcus said. "How if you are missed from your own place, and any think to wander where you are?" "I shall not be missed from my own place, for there will be many out hunting these next few days. If any come upon us together, I can always knife one of you and claim the honor of being first spear among the hunters." "It is a pleasant thought," said Marcus. "Do we come with you now?" "Yes, it is best that you come the first part of the way now," Gwyn decided. "We shall have to take the cow. Ill luck to her. She is forever straying." Marcus laughed and got up, catching his breath as his overtaxed leg twinged under him. "At least her straying has stood us in good stead tonight. Give me your shoulder, Eska. This place is somewhat steep." Many steep glens and moorland ridges lay between them and the place of the fighting stags, and it was near dawn when Gwern at last led them down into an old sandstone quarry that had not been worked since the eagles flew from Valentia. A quarry is like a mine or a big area of rock that they're kind of digging out to find something, metal, precious metals or whatever. He thrust them into the crumbling cave or gallery of some sort that seemed to have been the occasional lair of wild pig, and bidding them to be quiet until he came again, departed with the cow, who seemed very weary. "It may be that this will teach you not to wander again, O daughter of Arminan," they heard him say as he hauled her by the horns up the rough slope. Left to themselves, Marcus and Eska drew the hanging curtain of bramble and dog rose across the mouth of their hole and lay as comfortably as they could. "If the roof doesn't cave in and the pigs do not come back to challenge our presence, we look like having a quiet day," Marcus said, pillowing his head on his arms. Excuse me. Neither of these things happened, and the day dragged slowly by, while Marcus and Eska slept fitfully, trying to forget the emptiness of their stomachs. Beyond the bushes at the entrance, the light grew golden and then faded. It was after dusk when Gwern the hunter returned, bringing with him, besides the inevitable strips of leathery smoked meat, a lump of fresh broiled venison. "Eat the fresh meat now," he said, and quickly. They did as he bade them, while he stood leaning on a spear in the cave mouth, with the great dog lying at his feet, and before it was full dark outside, they were on their way again. They made slow marching at first, for Marcus's leg was stiff after the day's rest, but the way was easier than it had been last night, running mostly downhill, and little by little the stiffness wore off, and he was able to make better going. Silent as shadows, they followed Gwern by ways that only the hunter and the deer knew, with never a spoken word between them. But Marcus was puzzled as the hours went by, for as far as there had been no real difference between this and any other march that they had made among the hills, no sign of this unguarded way, which was death to travel without a guide. And then, as they came down a gentle slope, the air seemed to change, and with it the feel of the ground under their feet. And suddenly he understood. Bog. Bog, with presumably some hidden path across it for those who knew the secret. They came to the edge of it almost as abruptly as to the edge of a pool. And the queer, rooty smell of it was all around them. Gwern was casting about like a hound cutting across a scent. Suddenly he halted, and his dog with him. "Hence, it is here," he said, speaking under his breath for the first time since their setting out. "From now on we must go behind one another. Follow me exactly, and do not halt for so long as a heartbeat. Even on the secret way, the ground is soft. Do as I bid you, and you will cross safely. Disobey me, and you will sink." It was as simple as that. So they're crossing a bog, which is really marshy land that's mostly water and, very, if you step off the exact way, you will just sink and die. But he knows there is a pathway, but you have to know it and walk every step very precisely. So he's saying, follow behind me directly, exactly, and don't stop for a second because you might start to sink. Even the way that's safe is still soft. Understood, Marcus murmured back. It was no time or place for needless talk. Mithras alone knew how near the scouting tribesmen might be. With the dog pressed against them, Gwern turned outward to the bog. Marcus moved into place behind him, and Eska brought up the rear. The ground felt spongy under their feet, sucking at them gently at every step that seemed taken only just in time to keep from sinking. Ooh, that's scary. And they had gone only a short way when Marcus noticed that a faint mist had begun to rise. Very interesting. At first he took it no more than the breath of the bog, but soon he realized that it was more than that. Higher and higher it rose, wreathing upward in faint, gauzy swaths that closed together overhead. Looking up, he could still see the moon shining, but faintly through mist wreaths in the glimmering sky. Mist, the weather of all others that they had cause to dread, and that it should come now. There could be no turning back, yet how was it possible for any man to find such a way as they were following in this murk? And if they lost it, they would die. But that was not good to think about. The mist was thickening steadily. Soon they were walking almost blind, their world made up of a few feet of sodden turf and tufted bog cotton, and the occasional glint of water dissolving into a nothingness of glimmering mist. And there was no sign of any path. But Gwern never seemed at a loss. That's good. Walking lightly and steadily forward, changing his course from time to time, and the other two followed. The dank, rooty smell grew always stronger, colder. The moon was sinking low, and the mist losing itself in darkness. And still Gwern the hunter walked on, and on. It was very silent. Only a bittern boomed somewhere to the right, probably a bird, and there came small, evil-sucking noises from the bog. Ooh, that's creepy. Marcus had long since got over his first unpleasant doubts of Gwern's ability to find the secret way in the mist, but now he was beginning to wonder how much longer he could keep on at this light, unvarying stride. Oh, yeah, because his leg, right? Can he keep this up to stay alive, right? And then, suddenly, it seemed to him that the ground was growing firmer underfoot. A few more steps, and he was sure of it. They were drawing up out of the quagmire, the bog. The mist smelled different, chill as ever, but lighter and sweeter. Soon the secret way was behind them like an evil dream. By that time, dawn was near, and the mist was growing out of the darkness again, no longer glimmering, but dully gray as the ash of the long dead fire. So there's still a lot of mist out. The question is overall, is it going to be a help or not? Because it almost could have killed him in the bog, right? In the growing light, clear of the last pocket of bog, they halted thankfully in the lee of a clump of ancient thorn trees and turned to face each other while the dog lay down at their feet. "I have brought you as far as I can," Gwern said. "Every man to his own hunting grounds, and from now on the land is strange to me." "You have brought us clear through the guard of our enemies, and we can fend for ourselves now," Marcus said quickly. Gwern shook his ragged head doubtfully. "They may be drawing these hills also, for all I know." Therefore travel by night and lie up by day, and if you do not go astray in the mist, nor fall into the hands of the tribesmen, you should reach the wall sometime in the second night from now. Gwern shook his ragged head doubtfully. Just kidding, I just read that. He hesitated, trying to speak, and hesitated again. At last he said with a kind of half-angry humility, "Before our trails divide, it is in my heart that I would see the eagle once again. It was my eagle once." For answer, Marcus slipped the closely wrapped bundle from its sling, and turning back the folds, laid bare the lost eagle. It was dark and lusterless in the gray dawn murk, a mere bird-shaped lump of battered metal. "It has lost its wings," he said. Gordon reached out eagerly as though to take it, then checked, and dropped his hands behind to his sides. The betraying gesture tore harshly at something deep in Marcus's chest, and suddenly he could have howled like a dog. For a long moment he held the eagle, while the other stood with rigidly bent head, looking down at it, unspeaking. Then, as Gwern stepped back, he folded the dark cloth over once more, and returned it to its place under its cloak. Gwern said, "So, I have seen the eagle once more. Maybe after today I shall not look on a Roman face nor hear my own tongue spoken of her again. It is time you were on your own way." "Come with us," Marcus said on a sudden impulse. Gwern's ragged head went up, and he stared at Marcus under his brows. For an instant he actually seemed to be considering the idea. Then he shook his head. My welcome might be an overwarm one. I have no yearning after death by stoning." Because remember, he's part of the abandoned legion. "Tonight's work would alter that. We owe our lives to you, and if we get the eagle back to its own place, that will be your doing." Gwern shook his head again. "I am of the Selgave. I have a woman of the tribe to wife, and she is a good wife to me. I have sons born into my tribe, and my life is here. If ever I was something else, and my life was elsewhere, all that lies in another world, and the men I knew in it have forgotten me. There is no way back through the waters of Lethe." "Then, good hunting to you on your own trails," Marcus said after a silence. "Wish us well between here and the wall." "I wish you well. It is in my heart that I wish myself with you. If you win through, I shall hear of it and be glad." "You will have played no small part in it if we do," Marcus said, "and neither of us will forget it. The light of the sun be with you, centurion." They looked back when they had gone a few paces, and saw him standing as they had left him, already dimmed with mist, and outlined against the drifting mist beyond. A half-naked, half-wild-haired tribesman with a savage dog against his knee, but the wide, well-drilled movement of his arm as he raised it in greeting and farewell was all Rome. It was the parade ground and the clipped voice of trumpets and the iron discipline and the pride. In that instant, Marcus seemed to see not the barbarian hunter, but the young centurion, proud in his first command, before ever the shadow of the doomed legion fell on him. It was to that centurion that he saluted in reply. Then the drifting mist came between them. As they turned away, Marcus found himself hoping that Gwern would get back safely to the new life that he had made for himself, that he would not have to pay for the faith that he had kept with them. Well, the mist would give him cover on his homeward way. Almost as though he had heard his friend's unspoken thoughts and was answering them, Esca said, "He will hear if we come with our lives out of this, but we shall never hear whether he does." So Gwern will figure out whether they made it safely or not, but they're never going to know whether Gwern does. "I wish that he had chosen to come with us," Marcus said, but even as he spoke, he knew that Gwern the hunter was right. There was no way back through the waters of Lethe. 2 dawns later, okay, so they're on their last, it's on their last day. If they can make it today, they'll make it to the wall. Marcus and Esca were still a long way from the wall. No, maybe not. The mist had met them on the secret way. The mist that had met them on the secret way had haunted them ever since. A patchy and treacherous mist that was sometimes no more than a faint blurring of the distant hills, and at others swooped down on them, blotting out all landmarks in a swirling grayness in which the very ground seemed dissolving away. So sometimes they can just see it far away, and then sometimes it's like all up in them. blocking just about everything. They would have become lost over and over again, but for the hunter's sense of direction that made Eska able to smell the south as a townsman might smell garlic. That's funny. And even with that, to help them, they could only struggle on with maddening slowness, covering what distance they could when the mist thinned, and lying up wherever they happened to be when it grew too thick to push on any further. Once or twice they came very near to disaster. Many times they had to cast back for a way around some pitfall that the mist had hidden from them, and Marcus, who was leaving the route to Eska as usual, was having anxieties of his own. His lame leg, which had carried him well enough through the forced marches and weary scrambles of their way south, was beginning to let him down, and let him down badly. He held on doggedly, or like determinedly, but he was growing clumsy, and when he stumbled, the jar of it, or the, of it, made him set his teeth. Ouch. Grunting in pain. That dawn brought them their first warning that the enemy were indeed, as Gwern had said, drawing these hills also. So they're searching for them here too. When the fitful mist rolled back to show them the figure of a mounted man, evidently on watch, high on a hill shoulder, not more than a bow shot away. Luckily, he was not looking their way, and they fell flat among the heather, and spent a few bad moments watching him ride slowly along the ridge until the mist closed down again. Whew. They spent part of that day lying up in the lee of a great boulder, but started out again while there were still several hours of daylight left. While the mist hung about them, they had to abandon their plan of traveling only by night and push on when and how they could. "How far are we still to go by your reckoning?" Marcus asked, as he stood trying to rub the stiffness out of his leg. Eska tightened his rawhide belt, which had become too loose for him, collected his spear, and brushed up as well as he could the flattened grass where they had been lying. "It is hard to judge," he said. "It has been slow traveling in this murk, but I think I have not brought us greatly out of our way. By the fall of the land, I should say 12, 14 of your Roman miles. That's not too bad. There, if any hunter comes close to this place, he will see that we have lain here, but from a few paces distant, it will not show." They set out once more on the long march south, so they have a day's march ahead of them if they can make it in the day with the mist. And he's saying if someone comes close to where we've been, they'll see it, but because of the mist, if they're not walking real close, they might miss it. Toward evening, a faint wind began to stir, and before it, the mist, which had been thick all day, grew ragged as a beggar's cloak. "If the wind rises, we may lose this witch's brew at last, the mist," said Marcus as they halted at the curve of a narrow glen to make sure of their direction. Eska lifted his head and sniffed like an animal grown suddenly wary. "Meanwhile, it is in my heart that we should do well to find ourselves a foxhole until dusk. So find a place to hide out until it's nighttime. That way they can make the rest a bit more safely without being discovered." But they had left the finding of their foxhole too late. The words were scarcely out of his mouth when the mist seemed to curl back on itself. It spread sideways like blown smoke. The brown heather and golden bracken across the burn warmed suddenly through the drifting swaths. And next instant, a cry, high and carrying and oddly triumphant, pierced upward from the far side of the glen, and a saffron-kilted figure started from cover and ran, crouching low for the hill crest. Eska's spear followed him, but it was too far for a throw. In 6 racing heartbeats, he had reached the skyline and dropped out of sight, crying his summons as he ran. "They've been spotted." "Downhill," Eska said harshly, "into the woods." They swung in their tracks toward the nearest tongue of the birch woods that were spreading like a stain through the ragged mist. But even as they did so, the signal cry rose from among the golden trees and answered. There was no escape that way, and as they turned again, from far up the glen behind them, the same cry went up, thin as a bird's call. Only one way lay open for them, and they took it, straight uphill to their right, and what lay over the hill crest only the Lord of the Legions knew. They gained the crest somehow, Marcus was never sure how, and as they hesitated an instant on the bare ridge, the cry, it was changing its quality now, becoming a hunting cry, rose again behind them. and was answered and flung up out of the mist below, closing in. They must have blundered into a large band of the hunters. Southward along the ridge, a dark mass of firs seemed to offer a certain amount of cover, and they dived into it like hunted animals going to ground, and began to work their way forward into its heart. So again, more tall greenery and tall ferns. And so they rush into there, hoping that if the army crawl through, they can be hidden more or less, especially with the mist. But it was the mist, coming undone, that told them in the first place, the hunters, where they were. After that, all was a blurred confusion of mist and jagged firs branches, and a chaos of dark islands swirled through by tawny tides of bracken and bilberry, of lying rigid among the dagger-sharp furze roots with a suffocating reek of fox in their throats, and the horror of the hunted in their racing hearts, while death with many heron-tufted war spears stalked them through the dark maze. So, there's people all around them, and they're just, I don't know, it's just intense. There were men all round them, on horseback, on foot, thrusting, heedless of torn skin through the spiny branches, leaping high on stiff legs like hunting dogs who seek their quarry in long grass, giving tongue like hunting dogs do. I think when they say giving tongue, it means they're howling. Two, now on this side, now on that. Once a probing spear struck like a snake within a span of Marcus's shoulder, and then quite suddenly they realized that against all seeming possibility, the hunt had missed them. It had swept over them and was no longer all around them, but behind. Whew. They began to work forward on their stomachs again with slow, agonizing caution, like army crawling, right? They could not tell where they were going, save that it was away from the enemy behind them. A dark and evidently much-used tunnel in the firs opened to them, and they slid into it, Eska leading. The reek of fox grew stronger than ever. The tunnel curved, leading them slightly downhill, and there was nothing to do but follow it, no breaking out through the dense firs that walled and roofed it in. It ended suddenly on the edge of the cover, and before them a spur of rocky, bush-grown turf ran out at an angle from the main ridge. Swaths of mist, drawn up out of the deep glen, were still drifting across it before the rising wind, but at the furthest point, upward of a bow shot away, something that might be a brooch loomed through the grayness. It did not look promising, but they could not stay where they were, for it seemed to them that the sounds of the hunt were drawing near again, and there could be no turning back. So they struck out into the open, getting what cover they could from the rocks and scrub in search of some way down. But it seemed that there was no way down. The northwestern slope would have been easy enough, but as they crouched among the bushes at the edge of it, the jink of a pony's bridle came up to them, and the movement of men waiting. That way was securely stopped up. The southeastern scarp dropped practically sheer into drifting mist wreaths, out of which rose the indefinable sense and smell of deep water. So there's a cliff edge from one side with, water over here. The enemy behind them, it looks like the enemy's over here. There might be a way out for the eagle there, like with the cliff and the water, but there was certainly none for Marcus. Like they could drop the eagle over this cliff edge into the water below and let it escape that way from the hunting tribesmen. But Marcus couldn't do that and survive. Driven on by the sound of the hunt questing through the firs behind them like hounds after a lost scent, they struggled on a few steps, then checked, panting and desperate, looking this way and that with eyes that strained to find some way of escape. But Marcus was almost done, and Eska had his arm round him. They could go no further, even if the way were clear. They were trapped, and they knew it. The building that they had glimpsed through the mist was quite clear now, not a brooch at all, but an old Roman signal tower. They gathered themselves together and made for it. It was a very obvious hiding place, so obvious that it offered a bare chance of safety, or at all events respite, because the hunters might well have searched it already. At the worst, it would give them a chance to put up some sort of fight, and there was always the dark coming. So they're headed towards a Roman watchtower. The narrow archway, doorless now, gaped blackly in the wall, and they stumbled through into a small courtyard where grass had long since covered the cobbles. Another empty doorway faced them, and Marcus made for it. They were in the guardroom now. Dead leaves rustled to and fro on the floor, and the milky light filtering from the high window embrasure showed them the foot of a stairway in the wall. "Up here," he gasped. The steps were of stone and still in good condition, though slippery with damp, and they stumbled upward, the sound of their feet seeming very loud in the silence of the stone shell where a little Roman garrison had lived and worked, keeping watch over the border hills in the short years when the province of Valencia was more than a name. They ducked out through a low door under the signal platform on the flat roof of the tower. So there's this tower. I'm guessing that the stairs go in circular form. So they run in, they find the stairs, they go up, and they make it to the top. And thinking, you always have a huge advantage when you're on stairs on the high end, right? Especially if they're curved. They ducked onto the flat roof of the tower in the daylight as translucent as a moonstone after the dark below. As they did so, Marcus was almost blinded by a thrashing of great black wings past his face, and a startled raven burst upward, uttering its harsh, grating alarm cry, and flew off northward with slow, indignant wing beats, cacking as it went. Curse! That will announce our whereabouts clearly to all who may be interested, Marcus thought, so they're not even going to get any respite. But was suddenly too tired to care very much. Utterly spent, he lurched across to the far side of the roof and looked down through a crumbling embrasure. Below him, the ground dropped sheer from the tower foot, and through the last filmy rags of the mist he caught the darkness of deep water far below, a still and somber tarn brooding on its own secrets between the spur and the main ridge. Yet there would be a way out for the eagle. So their tower is actually on the cliff's edge. So the water that's deep far below, they have an option. If they get captured and killed, he can still throw the eagle off overboard. It will probably shatter and just become non-existent, and that's not what anyone wants. On the landward side, Eska was crouching beside a broken place in the parapet where several large stones had fallen, leaving a gap. They are still beating the firs, he muttered as Marcus joined him. It is well for us that there are no dogs with this band. If they do not come before dusk, we may escape them yet. They will come before dusk. Oh, Eska was saying all that, and Marcus is saying this. Whoops. Marcus murmured back, the raven has made sure of that. Listen. A sound came up to them from below the northern side of the spur, a confused, formless splurge of excitement, faint with mist and distance. It told them all too clearly that the waiting man had understood the raven's message. Marcus lowered himself stiffly onto his sound knee beside the other, slipped into an easier position, and stretched out sideways, leaning on one arm, his head hanging low. After a few moments, he looked up. I suppose I should feel guilty about you, Eska. For me, there has been the eagle. But what had you to win in all this? Eska smiled at him, a slow, grave smile. There was a jagged tear in his forehead where a furze root had caught him, Marcus noticed, but under it his eyes looked very quiet. I have been once again a free man amongst free men. I have shared the hunting with my brother, and it has been good hunting. Marcus smiled back. It has been good hunting, he agreed. The soft beat of unshod hooves on turf came drumming up from the mist below. The unseen hunters of the firs cover were casting back toward the open spur, beating as they came, making sure that their quarry did not again slip through them. They would be here soon, but the riders from below would be first. A good hunting, and now I think that it is ended. He wondered if any word of that ending would one day drift south across the wall, would reach the legate Claudius, and through him Uncle Aquila, the guy who was with Uncle Aquila, who sent him on this journey, right? Would reach Katia in the garden under the sheltering ramparts of Khalifa. He should like them to know it had been good hunting, and that he and Eska had had together. Suddenly he knew that, despite all outward seeming, it had been worthwhile, even if they die here. There was a great quietness in him. The last of the mist was blowing clear away as the wind freshened. Something that was almost sunshine brushed fleetingly across the old signal tower, and he noticed for the first time that a clump of harebell had taken root in a cranny of the fallen parapet close to him, and, late in flowering because of the place in which it grew, still carried one fragile bell aloft on an arching, thread-slender stem. There's a little flower up here. It swayed as the wind blew over and regaining its place with a tiny, defiant toss. It seemed to Marcus that it was the bluest thing he had ever seen, right before his possible death. Up over the edge of the spur, 3 wild horsemen appeared, heading for the gateway. Dun, dun, dun. All right. And that is it. We'll see if Marcus and Eska somehow make out of this alive next week.